hear from industry experts on budget and its impact on procurement practices, particularly related to road sectors. I have not prepared any presentation as such, but I'll just go through some of the policy initiatives and directions that I have seen in budget. Budget was presented almost 48 hours before. So it gave us enough time to gather the thoughts and understand the budget. Of course, a little bit of narrative change after yesterday night's US deal, but still, the budgets remains relevant. So some of the points which I'm going to highlight have already been highlighted by some of the speakers before me. But I'll just go through the points which I have seen, which will help, or which are, kind of new in this budget and would help in taking forward the momentum of growth through public capex and private capex. So I'll first talk about some of the growth enablers which I have seen in this budget, and then I'll talk about some of the things which could have been better in the budget and which are kind of missing, or maybe I have not been able to read because it's very difficult to read the budget in totality unless you are reading the original document. All you can see is you read at different places in media and then collect it in your mind. So the first thing which somebody else has also mentioned is that there will be an infrastructure risk guarantee fund. Now, as I have understood it is that there will be a fund which would underwrite the fundraising by private concessioners, and by virtue of that, I think they'll be able to raise funds at a slightly cheaper rate. Or, otherwise they may not get the fund, but because of the support of this fund, they'll be able to raise funds from banking and other financial institutions. Now, we are yet to see the exact details of this particular concept, but I hope it will become a very meaningful concept. In the past also, we have seen some of the agencies like that, but they have not been really that forceful and effective. But I hope this really becomes there was a talk about having an infrastructure bank in a couple of years back. Of course, a lot of things lost momentum in between because of COVID and all. But this time I hope this institution becomes effective. Second thing is, somewhere I read, and I'm not too sure, that there will be a special incentive for domestic manufacturing of the construction equipment. It could be, I think, in the form of some PLI schemes. I don't think till now PLI schemes were offered for construction equipments. But now, of course, there's a lot of talk that some of the critical construction equipments like TBMs and all should be manufactured within country. Because of the reason that in one of our high-speed rail projects, there were issues about getting TBM from China, which was a large diameter TBM. So now I think Harrington is setting up shop in India, and also Bharat Earth Movers Limited has been asked to set up a shop towards TBM manufacturing. So I think maybe the concept comes in the form of a policy framework. Probably there will be PLI type incentives also. We are yet to see that. Normally it happens like that first the budget comes as a policy statement, and in the coming weeks you get better insights and more clarity about what institutions and what frameworks would be put in place. So let's wait for that. Third thing, particularly for the local projects, is that now there's an incentive about raising municipal bonds. Till now we don't have this concept in a big way. I think Pune tried a couple of years back to raise some bonds. But if municipal bodies also start raising bonds, there's a scheme that probably 10% matching contribution will be given by Government of India also. I don't think it will be in terms of grant. It could be that they will also provide 10% worth of loan through one of the financial institutions of central government. So again, like I say, as the clarity comes, we would be able to appreciate the exact impact of this particular policy initiative. Then, of course, everybody is talking about the new freight, high-speed corridors. So there is nothing very new in that. Actually, some of them are already being discussed. Delhi, Varanasi, there has been DPR also done. And also this Pune, Nashik, Pune, Mumbai has also been discussed. And also Kerala government keeps talking about their internal, within the state, high-speed corridor. So that is one welcome step. But again, I won't say the very new or very special policy in there. Then, of course, a very good initiative is to set up rare earth corridors. Already we have a public sector called Indian Rare Earths Limited based out of Prabhadevi in Mumbai. Now, I think the idea is to have some dedicated 4 corridors in coastal districts of Kerala, Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, and probably in Odisha. I've already seen some rare earth set up in Gopalpur and all. I think that will become more focused now because now everybody is talking about semiconductors and crypto. So in that also, there is a potential for EPC players and consultants like us. Let's see how that evolves. Then, of course, there is one more view is that there will be a committee to look at overall banking sector, and also there is a thought process that probably the lending agencies like REC, PFC could be consolidated so that there is a scale of magnitude which can take care of the financing requirements of infrastructure. And we, for one of our projects, also talked to PFC, which eventually did not materialize, and we had to go to central bank. But as bigger players emerge, probably they have better capacity to tap funds from the market and in turn give it to concessioners and even government bodies now. MMRD also goes to central bank and PFC and all. Of course, everybody is talking about 10% hike in infra capex, which is a good step. It is consistent with the nominal GDP growth rate. So at least that much hike should be there. Ideally, there should be more than nominal GDP growth rate. 10% is the nominal GDP growth rate, which has been conceptualized in this budget. So it could have been more, but still, it's not just how much you earmark. What is also important is that whatever you allot should be spent also. Like in defense, this time happened because of Operation Sindhu that they have been able to marginally exceed the allotted defense capex. And this year, for defense also, there is almost 22% hike in allotment for capital expenses, which also benefits infrastructure sector. It's not that there's a mindset that defense sector doesn't benefit directly, but likes of L&T and all do a lot of work nowadays for infrastructure, excluding the dockyards and all which they do. One more very good thing is, and this is somewhere related to last night's deal also, that there will be a 20 years tax holiday now for data center, cloud infrastructure, and probably for global delivery centers also. That would be a welcome step. Again, we'll have to see the fine print, but that's a good step. One more thing which has been said now is that this year they have maintained the fiscal discipline. 4.4 they maintained last year. For next year, the target is 4.3%. But going forward, the idea is to shift to a debt GDP ratio rather than being too much dependent on this concept of fiscal deficit. So right now they are at around 55%. In 3 to 5 years horizon, they want to bring it down to 50%. I think that would give them some more headway to spend. I'm not too sure these two benchmarks how much they'll benefit, but broadly I've been given to understand that by shifting to debt GDP ratio, there'll be more headroom available for government to spend without breaching the limits of fiscal discipline. Let's see how that also plays out. So these are some of the policy initiatives in the budget which I have seen. Now, a lot of other things are there. Somewhere I did 30,000 crore has been allotted for metro. Someone says the Jal Jeevan projects have not been properly funded this time. So I'm not too sure about that. But I've read about it here and there. What is also important is that we keep talking about disinvestment. But disinvestment in our case is that this year they are planning to divest IDBI finally, which they have been discussing for last 10 years almost. I think it is now presently held by LIC. Of course, there are other assets monetization happens once in a while. I think there will be a second series of now airport divestment for tier 2 type, tier 3 type airports. That let's see how it works. I hope more participation happens in there rather than going to selected people. It's better to have new players, and they should also be supported by banking institutions. So there are certain things which are not so. I mean, everybody knows that headline indices went into red on the day of budget. And the reason was some of the market-related changes pertaining to security transaction tax, and there is something about buyback on capital gain tax, and it's also income tax now on buyback schemes, which is fine. It doesn't directly affect our sector, but in a way, our sector also needs support of financial institutions because whenever private investment happens for greenfield, brownfield things, they also need to tap money from financial institution, including foreign financial institution, and also the companies which work with the infra sector also raise, fund from market through IPO and QIPs for their growth capital. So in a way, if there is a confusion, you know, of course, a lot was discussed about it on Sunday, but yesterday the narrative changed. But I think in coming days, they might relook at these things. You know, if there is something required to be done to give confidence to the financial institutions, particularly foreign financial institutions, I think they'll relook at it. It happened in 2019 also. There's a lot of confusion about buyback schemes and others, and they did a lot of course correction in 2019, including the corporate tax rate which they did in 2019. So I'm sure they'll look at these so-called negatives also, and they have enough time. You know, they can come back in the second session of budget session and relook at these things. Other than that, really not much was expected this time because GST has already been recalibrated a couple of months back, and that has started showing effect. And income tax concession were quite significant last year. So I think this time they could have not done it. So that's fine. They had the luxury of not doing it. But despite that, if consumption improves, which is being reflected in GST numbers also. If you see January GST number, despite GST tax recalibration, I think they had a 6.5% growth. That means consumption is on track, which in turn will fuel your private investment also. Because one thing you know that public capex by itself still cannot, you know, run this show. There has to be at least an equal combination. I think right now the ratio of public to private investment is slightly in favor of public investment, which was not the case, I think, until 10 years ago. But it's time we go back to that, at least the equilibrium between the two, or ideally, you know, private should come back and, you know, play at least slightly better role than the public sector. So that because a lot of money now from the government side goes in welfare schemes. Also, the government cannot always spare enough money for infra sector. So some kind of private investment has to come, for which, you know, you need to look at some of the policy initiatives which have been not carefully amended so far. So that's my broad analysis about the budget, particularly with reference to infra sector, public capex, private capex. With that, I conclude my discussion, and I'll be open to any questions or any discussion that we have after this. Thank you.